in my mouth and the meditation of my heart be ever mindful of thee, O Lord, my strength and my salvation. Amen. Would you please be seated? Alan, could you shut the doors? I want to hear myself. I want that sound to bounce back, not get lost in the narthex. I have reached that wonderful age when I don't have to do anything anymore. I don't have to experience things. I can pay for my kids to do stuff, so I don't have to. I don't have to walk along the top of the Great Wall of China. I don't have to bathe in the Mekong River with elephants like my daughter Laura did last summer. For a person of my generation, you just didn't go on a vacation to the Mekong River Delta. And this year, I don't have to go out west. My daughter Claudia, I think you know, has been transferred by the organization she works for from Miami all the way to Seattle, which involves Daddy buying a complete new wardrobe, because what you wear on South Beach is not what the hipsters wear in Seattle. But this summer, she's doing work in Kalispell, Montana. And I said, Cowbell, Montana, where is that? It's at the base of Glacier National Park. And Claudia has headed out west, and she's just started work, but she's been sending me photos of all the places that if I were a good father, I would have taken my children, but now I don't have to, because she's seen the Grand Canyon. She's been to Yosemite. She's been to Zion National Forest and the arches, monuments, all these things that you see in the background of John Wayne movies and whatnot. I've never wanted to go there. That's not my style. But Claudia, it cost a great deal of money for me for her to look shabby down at heels. She has a little Jeep convertible, and she's driving out west with her plaid shirt and her down vest and her Jeep with the top off, looking as if she were a model in one of these Western wear magazines. All that stuff I just had to buy. But she said, oh, Daddy, I just came to the headwaters of the Missouri River. And it's so exciting because on this spot, Lewis and Clark, almost 200 years ago, reached the Continental Divide. Because once you're over this ridge, everything on the west side flows to the Pacific. And from here, this little stream, this brook that babbles out of the side of a mountain, flows into the Missouri River, which flows into the Mississippi River, and flows out into the Gulf of Mexico. Isn't this so exciting? And I felt like saying, better you than me. But it's an exciting time to be young, to be traveling, and to see the land and life, and it's just the enjoyment of being alive and out there in the world. And part of our reading this morning is about investing in life. Live life to the fullest. But what happens when evil things come? What do you do? How do you live? And that's the story of Naaman the Syrian. It's got babbling brooks and streams in it as well. But they're very different from the headwaters of the Missouri River. Our story this morning of Naaman the Syrian is found in the second book of Kings, and it concerns the prophet Elisha. Now, the reading starts out, Naaman the Syrian was a great general of the king of Aram. He was a victorious, mighty warrior. He's the Douglas MacArthur of Syria. He's in the movie going to be played by Gregory Peck or John Wayne. This is a somebody, a man who has the world at his fingertips, powerful, strong, victorious, trusted by his king. He's portrayed unambiguously as a great man, but he's a pagan, he's a Gentile, he's not a Jew, and he has leprosy. He lives with an affliction. Now, in the Old Testament, leprosy covered everything from psoriasis to what we call Hansen's disease, which is actual leprosy. So we don't know what sort of skin disease he had, but he had a skin disease, which in the Jewish world made him unfit for human company. It was the Jews in the law given to Moses at Sinai and in Deuteronomy that said someone with leprosy may not be in the community. It was only the Jews who separated the lepers to prevent infection and impurity and uncleanliness. So Naaman the Syrian, we know he's a Gentile even by the fact that he has leprosy and he lives with his family. And he has leprosy. And he wishes, he wants to find a way out. Because life is so great and so good. He's at the top of his game. Except his body is falling apart. Now in Naaman's household is a slave girl, a little Jewish girl. The Bible tells us that she had been captured in the wars against Israel and been sold into slavery and was Naaman's wife's maid. And this little girl says to Naaman, go, if we were in Israel, because there's a prophet in that country who will cure you. And Naaman goes to the king of Aram and says, may I go visit our enemies, the Jews, and seek out this prophet? And the king says, sure. And the story continues that Naaman goes to the king in Israel. And he says to the king in Israel, this is why I'm here, to be clean, to be cleansed. And the king of Israel's response is to grab his hair and tear at himself and say, oh no, what shall I do? This is an impossible request. Maybe it's a setup. These people have been beating us up for years, and maybe this is a provocation for another attack. If we don't solve this man's problems, they'll attack again. So the passage continues, Elisha the prophet heard of this and said, send him to me. So Naaman the Syrian and his entourage, and it lists all the wealth, all the gold, all the things that he would pay to be healed. He comes to the home of Elisha. And I just imagine the scene. Up drives Naaman in his Cadillac, his chariot. And Elisha is in the recliner in the TV room. And Elisha doesn't answer the door. He doesn't go outside. He sends a messenger to say, what do you want? And it's brought back, and Elisha responds, oh, just go jump in the Jordan 7 times, and you'll be clean. Now, friends, this really annoyed Naaman. He was a somebody. He was a great man, and he had the money to prove it with him. He wanted to get value for his money, and all he's been asked to do is to jump in the Jordan River. Now, friends, if you've been to Israel, one of the great disappointments of your trip is seeing the Jordan River. There's the place where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, and the Jordan River at that point is basically as wide as this church. It's muddy brown. It looks like the Withlacoochee River is the mighty Mississippi compared to the Jordan River. It's not, it reminds me of the Schuylkill River of my childhood in Philadelphia, except the Schuylkill would catch on fire every so often from the refineries. But it's basically that sort of river. It's not a bubbling spring. It's not the headwaters of the Missouri falling through alpine glades with life and froth and bubbles. Jordan's a dirty, muddy, small. It's there. It's not that big of a deal. And I'm to dip myself 7 times in this river? Why couldn't I just go back to Syria and bathe in the what were the words? I've got to look them up. The Babona and Farbar rivers. Those rivers are in the mountains of the Lebanon. And they flow out of the side of the mountains, the springs, and they're beautiful, they're bubbling, they're swift, they're gorgeous waters. It's like what Claudia experienced in the great Northwest, not West, these living waters where they make sounds and they're alive and the air is gorgeous and it's like champagne. Why couldn't I have been like that and go to those really nice rivers? And they are. These rivers come across from out of the Lebanon into the plain of Syria and actually make their way out to the sea through the Tigris and the Euphrates. They're the headwaters of those mighty rivers of Asia. Why couldn't I go there? We've got better rivers at home. And Naaman's, forget this. He's going to drive off in his Cadillac.
not even seeing Elisha, who doesn't even have the courtesy to get out of his seat and talk to this important man. But the servant said to him, just do it. You brought all this money in anticipation of paying a great fee. You're ready to go climb the highest mountain to do great feats. And if you're willing to do that, why don't you just try it? And take a leap of faith and stick your head in the Jordan River 7 times. And he did, and he was healed. Now, on a surface level, this is a story of God's healing people. He's healing a foreigner. But if I look at this story, who is the real hero? Who is the story that the whole story is that pivot? It's not Naaman. It's not even Elisha. It's a nameless Jewish slave. Think about this for a minute. You've been ripped from your family, carried off into slavery. God knows what's happened to you on that journey. And now you've wound up as a maid, as a slave in the home of the conqueror. There's no statement whatsoever that Naaman was so happy that you were set free. There's nothing to say that anything good in earthly terms came to this woman. She's a slave, she's a victim, she's been oppressed, she's been abused, yet she still does good to even the people who've done evil to her. And she's told him where to find the Lord through the prophet Elisha. What evil has happened in your life, God can still use for good. Do you think that this little girl prayed, Lord, save me, Lord, help me, Lord, give me victory over my enemies? Of course, I'm sure she said all that, but did the Lord do any of that? No, he didn't. She's still a slave at the end of the story. Her lot hasn't changed, but God used her evil, the evil done to her, to change the world, to let the world know who is Lord. Now, what does this mean? This means for us that even in the most broken part of your life, God is present, and good can come out of suffering. Oh, I hate that, don't you? I want religion to be like Naaman has it. You get what you pay for. If I pay a lot of money, if I walk up these stairs on my knees, if I flagellate myself, if I do these things, I'll be saved. But all it took was faith. It didn't take money, it didn't take power, it didn't take anything but faith. I'd rather have a religion that you get what you pay for than I know what I'm paying for. Instead, I have to pay nothing, but offer everything, which is myself. I'd rather have a religion where if I pray to be released from slavery, that's the first thing that happens. I don't want to be used for the glory of God. I want something from me. Are you like that? Well, life isn't like that. Evil will happen to us. As I look across this room, I know just about everybody, and I know most of your stories, and I know many, many, many of us have gone through traumatic, horrible events in our lives. And for me to say that God is there is really offensive sometimes. It really hurts, because what I went through, I wouldn't want anybody else to go through it. You think God is behind that? I'm not saying God tortured you. God wasn't the cause of your pain. Evil people do evil things. And there are things in this life that just happen. My wife is on vacation with our daughter in Los Angeles, and they experienced their first earthquake. And they thought it was really neat. Everybody else in that apartment block ran out into the street, deathly afraid the whole thing was going to come down. Susan and Laura in their penthouse, oh, isn't this fun? Because they had no experience of the evil caused, that nature can bring. People can cause evil. Nature can bring evil. Evil will happen. just in our minds, we're called to do the right thing, no matter what happens to us. We're to pray for our enemies as Christians. We're to pray for the people, for my master if I'm a slave. We're to forgive the people who oppress us and hurt us and beat us and torture us. Because out of that, God can raise up something so great, and I may never even know it. But God has a plan, and if you are faithful to Him, the evil that has happened in your life need not rest there, but can be used by God. And you've got to cooperate. You've got to do your part. You don't have to pay money. You don't have to climb the highest mountain. You don't have to do things. You have to be faithful and true and just. Oh, friends, these are old-fashioned words that are really, really out of fashion, aren't they? Duty, honor, integrity. But these are things called for by a Christian to live out in their life. Not because he gets something in return. If you're the one honest cop in the force, you think you're going to prosper? No, you're not. But it's still the right thing to do. You live in a broken world. Don't go along to get along. Go along with the unchanging truth of Jesus Christ. Friends, we're never going to be sold into slavery. We don't live in a corrupt society, a broken society. We may have our faults around here, but it's a pretty nice place. So the extremes that we hear about, read about, and we know about, may never happen to us. So what's our excuse for not standing up for Jesus? How can you live your life? Take the pain and the brokenness and the suffering that you've experienced and give it to God for His glory. Oh, that makes no sense, George. Those are just words. Put my sufferings at the foot of the cross? Yeah, I've heard that one before. I still feel rotten after I do it. Let's do it anyway. And allow God to work in your heart. You may not ever know the reason why you've had to suffer. You may not know the reason why you were betrayed, the reason why you were hurt, the reason why somebody died. But I want to know. It's natural. And sometimes we can know, but often we can't. At the end of the day, our response must be exactly the same. Faithfulness to God. Hold on. Hold fast. Do the right thing. Susan, as I mentioned, is away in California, and I take her trips as opportunities to clean the house. Yes, I'm neurotic like that. And we have this rather ugly sewing table that I've just been wanting to forget at the dump every so often. But I can't because it's her mother's. So when her mother dies, I can throw it out to her. And I thought, well, at least I'll clean it out. And I opened it up, and there's stuff that, a second grade report card, just junk. Dead batteries, and all the way at the little bottom was a box, and on this box it said Daddy's Medals. And I took it up, and I opened it up, and in this box were her, Susan's father's Marine Corps paraphernalia. And I looked through, and folded in the bottom was a little citation next to this other medal. And I read all about her, and Susan never really talks about this, because this was years before she was born. And Susan's father died when she was 9 years old. So he was always almost more of a mythic figure than a person he knew. Her mother remarried, and she had a stepfather from the age of 12, but Daddy's medals were Bob Baxter's medals. And reading the citation, I read a story about this man who, a 19-year-old in the Marine Corps. He was a second lieutenant, 90-day wonder, I guess they call it. And this was in the winter of 1951. And the Chinese had just crossed the Yalu, the river across, dividing northern Korea and China. Up to that point, the U.S. and Allied armies under Douglas MacArthur had landed behind the rear of the North Koreans at Incheon and driven the North Korean communists all the way up to the border of China. And at that point, the Chinese communists under Mao Zedong crossed the Yellow River. Over 1 million Chinese against about 100,000 American and Allied soldiers and Marines. And on the east coast were the Marines, and on the west coast were the Army and the Allies, and there's a ridge of mountains down the middle of Korea. And it was the winter, and Bob Baxter, 19-year-old second lieutenant, who left college because he wasn't doing too well. His advisor said, "Bob, you're not going to make it at this school. Go out, join the army, join something, just get your life together." And he joined, found himself in the mountains of Korea. And the citation read, as the Chinese were advancing, his platoon was overrun on the top of a mountainside, on a little hill on top of a mountain, some nameless mountain somewhere. And a grenade was thrown into that dugout where he and all his men were. And Bob threw himself on top of that grenade, and it went off. And Bob, the reason why Susan's so tall is her father was 6'7". And in those days, someone who was 6'7" played basketball, even if they didn't want to. Bob never played basketball again, and he was never 6'7" because he had nothing below his knees. He lost his legs. Not out of an act of calculated heroism, not out of this is, what I should do, but because giving myself to my men is the right thing to do. Now, in this trench full of 18 and 19-year-old Marines with a 19-year-old officer, who's the most valuable man? Well, of course, the Princeton man. It's not how life really works. You don't make those calculations. You give no matter what because it's the right thing to do. When Susan's father eventually died, her mother would one day told me that Bob was one of the last casualties of the Korean War because he never ever recovered. He had what was called PTSD. They didn't call it that then. They called it shell shock or battle fatigue. And at night, he would have these dreams and would always be of the Chinese who wore tennis shoes or sneakers and a little pat, pat, pat at the feet on the rocks with the bugles sounding. The Chinese didn't use radios, they used bugles. And he would awake screaming in terror 20 years later from this event that happened in the winter of 1951. Friends, we're sometimes called to heroic acts. Bob's life did not turn out the way it should have. Bob had a beautiful career, whichever way he would have gone. But Bob's life was cut short by an act of service and heroism. And at the end of the day, what would another lawyer, what would another basketball player, what would another, person like that be in this place, in this world, compared to the lives, the sacrifice, and the example he showed to his men? Bob never experienced the joy. He got a little box with an inscription on it and a nice little, signed by the Secretary of the Navy at the bottom. Friends, that's the right thing to do. You don't apply cost-benefit analyses to morals and to life. You do what the slave girl did. You do the right thing. I wish it were so. I wish life were A and B and all that happens, If I do X, they do Y, and I can plan and calculate. It doesn't work that way. You do the right thing, even if you have no idea what the outcome of the whole show's going to be. Faithfulness. Faithfulness. That's what it's all about. That's what you're called to be as a Christian. And that works itself out in faithfulness in marriage, faithfulness in your work, faithfulness in your relationship, faithfulness in your church. You must be faithful because that is what God respects.